Combined Arms Center and Army Futures Command. With that, there's a large enterprise working human-machine interface and robotics. So some things we're doing is, one, looking at the operating environment now and in the future, and then working to describe how we're going to fight, how we're going to employ human-machine interface, HMI, robotics is a piece of that. It's important I think, to do that first so we understand the impact it's going to have and operationally how we want to use it, and to really think hard about that. And in conjunction with our formations, and we're redesigning some of our formations right now, and we're looking at ensuring there's landing spots in those formations for HMI capability. And myself and the infantry and armor commandants both working that. And then the reason why it's important to get the description on how we want to employ them is ideally that drives capability development. That drives the things that our industry partner works on, because they understand operationally how we want to employ them. We also know there are emerging technologies out there that we want to leverage now, and we got to think about how to incorporate how we want to fight. So there's a little bit of a balance of looking towards the future, the concept on how we want to do it, and then also leveraging what's being done right now. I'd just say a couple themes emerge, and I'll just hit on a couple of them. And you heard the Secretary this morning mentioned something to the effect of, don't trade blood at first contact. Shame on us if we're not focused on figuring out how to use robotics and human-machine interface prior to first contact. And so we can employ it to sense, and we see that in air UAS and ideally ground-based also, and sensors, and help us understand when you add in the power of data and aided target recognition, AI. We also have an opportunity to protect and maybe have counter-US capability on robotics. Again, forward of the first IV line, forward of contact, and then also to kill and to have an impact lethally on our average size. So think this web of integrated air and ground sensors and different payloads, again, moving forward or as you're getting ready to make contact with the adversary to probable line of contact. And then also can use for a variety of other things, resupply, CASEVAC, important missions across what our BCTs do. A second key theme is seeking commonality, and that's in the sense of ideally common platforms but different payloads. To make it easier to employ and a common network, so we're able to operate this seamlessly across a network, as well as common controllers, something we're working hard down in our Maneuver Capability Development Integration Directorate. We don't need soldiers walking around with 9 different controllers to control robotic capability out there. And then third, to offload risk to machines. There's opportunities where there's risk, whether it's in CBRN, chemical detection, breaching, dull missions, maybe some sensors on avenues of approach or tasks, again, that we can use these robotics for, and then also use them to optimize our actions. How do you use data, machine learning, AI to help us make better decisions, to help inform our decision making? Not necessarily make decisions for us, still a values-based, commander-centric Army, but clearly, ideally, there's a UAS capability with AI that can see and determine and tell exactly what it's looking at, and maybe feed an attack guidance matrix to know automatically what lethal munition we should put against it. Fourth is a formation-based approach. General Rainey, reminds us of that all the time. This is about enabling our formations, thinking about them not in terms of a specific, human-machine interface, but how the interfaces with the formations makes them better. We want to be smaller, more mobile, more strategically deployable, particularly our heavy forces, and more lethal. And so again, I talked about landing spots. Right now we're focused on something we're going to do in the next couple weeks, where we're incorporating robotic capability into a light infantry company and also working hard onto a heavy infantry company also. Then the last thing is, it's not all about new platforms too. I think we've got to think about how do we incorporate this capability with legacy platforms. How do we ensure that if we've got, let's say, a ground-based loitering munition or sensor, it can come out, it can potentially move as an internal load or external load on an AMV, a Bradley, Stryker, any of our vehicles we're still going to have for a while, and then be deployed before probable line of contact and move out? How do we integrate tethered and untethered UAS and loitering munitions into our existing capabilities? So bottom line, we're working hard to define how we fight, again, to drive capability development, looking at emerging tech, and then also we're responsible for the DOT-MIL PF integration, doctrine, organization, training. How do we think differently about using that? And a variety of great experiments have already been run, and some over the next year here. So with that, I will turn over to the next person.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Jeff Norman, the director of the Next Generation Combat Vehicles cross-functional team up at Detroit Arsenal. Part of Army Futures Command, but really one of General Buzzard's forward elements, if you will, working specifically on a few of the Army's modernization priorities, one of which is the robotic combat vehicle. And so I'll pick up where General Buzzard finished and describe one of the platform capabilities and formation capabilities that we're working on, robotic combat vehicles in the heavy formations and in our armored brigade combat teams. And so briefly, we're looking at taking the concepts that are developed at Fort Moore, Georgia, under the Maneuver Center CG's guidance and the Commandant's guidance, and operationalizing those. And so we're looking at developing robotic sections that consist of one control vehicle and 2 robots. Versions of those robots are out here on the floor, and you can see what we're looking at. But generally speaking, we're seeing these sections consisting of a control vehicle and 2 robotic combat vehicles, which, as General Buzzard described, will have a common platform, but modular mission payloads that will fill different mission roles. And what mission roles they perform, what the priorities are for those modular mission payloads, is something that we've worked on over the course of the last 5 years in experimentation that's been done, soldier-centered design experimentation that's been done in conjunction with Mr. Kaju's team at the Ground Vehicle Systems Center. He'll talk about that in a minute. But most recently, out at the National Training Center, we used pre-production prototype RCV lights, Stryker control vehicles, employed various tethered UAS, smoke obscuration modules, CROWS J, the common remotely operated weapons station, machine gun with Javelin, and had some really amazing effects. The opportunity to gain first contact with a robotic system, with an unmanned system versus a soldier, achieving that desired situation where we make contact with a robot and don't trade it for blood. Had the opportunity to thicken our formations capabilities without having to add manned or crewed platforms to those formations. So really, what we're trying to achieve is to allow our formations to fight bigger than themselves without having to add a lot of manned combat power to those formations. But over the course of the last 5 years in the experimentation that we've done, it's allowed us to sort of put a finer point on what missions we think the robotic elements are best suited for, and which missions or operations are the humans most important for. And so as we've prioritized, we've assessed that the robots are best suited right now for surveillance missions, surveillance and screening missions, for defensive operations, and then after that, reconnaissance operations, and then the most complicated and most demanding is an offensive attack mission, if you will, that requires the highest levels of automation and autonomy, whereas the first mission sets I described require lower levels of autonomy and automation and can rely a little more heavily on tether, a remote tether between the control vehicle and the robot. But we're really excited about the direction things are going, but I highlight that range of mission alternatives because one of the things that it highlights is that we're not letting our ambition or our desire for the optimal solution to stand in the way of us fielding minimum viable capabilities out to the force now. That's why we're experimenting in the dirt with the OPFOR. That's why a year ago we spent more than 5 weeks down at Fort Cavazos with 17 Cav in a soldier operational experiment, gaining the insights with those min-viable products so we could learn. Wrapping up, I'll just build on a couple things that or maybe the paradox that we're working for. And it builds on the notion that we want to get the advanced capabilities out to our formations. But the challenge is, the thing that really stands in the way of soldier adoption is the reliability and the ruggedness of the robotic systems. So one of the things that we're approaching is an incremental approach to getting the systems out to formations by having rugged and reliable capabilities now, building towards our more ambitious goals later, but starting with rugged, reliable systems that allow us to gain the soldier's trust and the trust of leaders so we can start developing the formation capabilities and the techniques to employ human-machine integrated teams. So with that, I'll pass it over to Mr. Cadju, and he'll take it from there.
Good afternoon. Again, my name is Michael Cadju, Director of the DEVCOM Ground Vehicle Systems Center. And General Buzzer, General Norman, I'm not sure where to go after that. You stole half my words on the sheet. And as actually we look at the crowd here, thank you for participating in this discussion. It kind of reminds me of getting in here this morning and how many of you wanted to use your TSA pre-check, and where was that line? So GVSC is one of several DEVCOM Army S&T activities. And General Norman mentioned over the last 5 years, there's been significant experimentation. Underpinning that experimentation has been a lot of investment working with industry and academic partners within the S&T space, as well as investment on industry on yourselves as well. I did a quick math this morning, something in the probably greater than 50 different industry partners we've been collaborating with and experimenting with the technology that comes from that partnership. And it really can be boiled down to 2 lines of effort from a technology-specific perspective. One is maturing components on the base platform itself and the underlying architecture to ensure that we know how to very rapidly integrate the mission modular payloads that have been discussed. From a hardware perspective, how can we do it very rapidly? From a software perspective, how do we do it where it's cyber secure, where it doesn't require reprogramming of a unique controller and 12 months of interfacing design, but something we can do it very quickly. We understand how the data can be consumed within that common controller. So a lot of that base platform and the architecture work. The second piece of that is looking at the operator interface. What, first of all, is the right way that which soldiers are looking for the information where it's not a cognitive burden or a data overload? How do we leverage technologies such as artificial intelligence or other optimization technologies to present the layers of information in a way that you can take action very cleanly and clearly on? Those lines of effort have all fed that experimentation activities. In fact, last year I think we just wrapped up the Soldier Operational Experiment number 2 at Fort Cavazos. And you mentioned that we recently had 2 robotic sections of RCV light pre-production surrogate prototypes or something to that effect with Stryker control vehicles. I found it very actually fascinating from a technology perspective. One, there's absolutely technology that's available today that's effective and creates advantages and capability that we don't have now. The second piece to that is the feedback sometimes tells us, just give me simple things. An example, when we were out there talking about controllers, and in my case, it's also looking at the ratio is not necessarily, right now it's, can you get to 1 operator to control 2 robots, but we're thinking in the future, how do I control swarms? The operator at NTC said, you know what, I don't need this kind of steering wheel that looks like an F1 steering wheel. Give me a mouse and a keyboard because I am at 29 hours of War Thunder every day, and I can absolutely control multiple robots and their payloads from a mouse and a keyboard. And so that's some of the feedback that I think is interesting as we do this experimentation. It identifies what state-of-the-art technology that offers value today. We can prove out, do we have the architecture correct to consume new or emerging technology, oftentimes that's coming from you all here at a show like AUSA. And ultimately, from my mind, it's helping inform the training, the doctrine, the organization, as well as the requirements that Jeff and his team are putting in the program of record increments for RCV, as well as other platforms such as those that will support the logistics or demand reduction operations. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shane.
Yeah, we've got sound. So first of all, I want to echo the thanks for everybody. great group out here. I'm Colonel Shane Upton, as I said before, the new director of the new contested logistics cross-functional team located at Redstone Arsenal, Alabama. So we get charged with helping the future force sustain these formations. So just 3 or 4 things I want to pull on real quick with my teammates. Precision. So when we look at smaller, more dispersed, human-machine integrated formations, the sustainment is going to have to be more precise. And we're going to have to enable our formations to make those decisions in a decision dominance role. And as a logistician for a career, and there are many I see familiar faces out in the crowd, that decision dominance is going to be enabled by human-machine integration, AI, ML, and be able to do it at scale, much smaller up front. That's what we're looking at, to be more dispersed in that piece. The second piece that goes right into that are multi-capable distribution platforms. And General Buzzard mentioned the multi-capable payload piece. That's exactly also in the logistics of these formations. We have to have interoperable, common platforms. It also reduces the sustainment footprint, but they can interchange loads easily from, say, a munitions load to another payload and back and forth in that multi-capable role. The other piece there is advance and decision dominance over demand reduction. We have to look at formations and robots or that capability to do things at point of need to take some of that stress and strain off our already large distribution networks, especially when you look at the sheer distance of a place like the Indo-PACOM AOR. And then finally, advanced power. Machines and humans as an integrated formation, we're going to have to figure out how we power those formations. Obviously, we are used to doing fuel-based and some other critical logistics resupply to these, but with these formations, as we stand up robotic capability, we're going to have to look at other alternate means to maybe look at what we can do to resupply or increase our operational reach of these formations and their endurance. So absolutely looking forward to it and really excited to be on the panel, but I'll turn it over to General Ahern.
Thanks, Shane. And I think, as you heard across all 4 of the gentlemen, the different roles that human-machine integration, from the sensing, protection, medical sustainment, but even from supporting the decision-making, being able to integrate with the legacy systems, making sure that we're interoperable not only with Army, Joint, and our allies and partners, but then also, as the Secretary talked about this morning, making sure that we have the adaptability and flexibility for whatever's coming at us. But I think one of the things that also came out very strongly is that the Army, we are the people. The Army is the people. And what I would ask is that as we're integrating this new technology, how do we make sure that we keep trust in our people, but we also have confidence in the equipment that we're fielding? And how do you see, from a human-machine integration, putting into the Army formations, what are the challenges that you all are wrestling with, and what are the things that we in the Army, whether it's the soldiers or industry, government, that we should be thinking through?
Well, I guess, first from my perspective, I think a lot of our young people are digital natives and are very comfortable employing this type of technology, from ground-based stuff to UAS that they're buying at home and flying. And I kind of challenge. We run the small UAS master trainer course, and we've got to go through and teach and train folks on a bunch of legal requirements with respect to airspace and everything else. But we know a young person could grab a UAS and fly it within an hour probably. And when you look at the Ukrainians and being in a fight and how quickly you adapt and adjust, and how they've come to arm about everything that can fly, and just very innovatively employ this, I think our young people are going to naturally be comfortable with it. The trust piece, I think, isn't so much in the future of human-machine interface. It's really the ruggedness of the actual equipment. When they get handed something to test out in the desert or in the field, will it be able to work as advertised, because of, again, just the austere environment and the rough conditions of combat. But I think, I think the cognitive overload, sometimes I think we may be overemphasizing that with young people, because again, they're used to doing things, and again, watching, multiple things at a time, and you're watching what's going on overseas, and you're seeing this happen in spades. So I guess, for me, I think inherently very trusting in where we're going with that and opportunities to leverage it. The challenge is just the system in the field.
So building on that, some of our observations from the field is most generally, the thing that soldiers want from robots is a capability that allows them to fight better than if they didn't have the robot, which might sound like a no-brainer. But if the robots actually put a burden on them, if they have to think more about fighting the robot than they think about fighting their formation without the robot, they don't want it, or robots plural. If they don't have the tactical flexibility because they're a formation that's burdened with robots and they're more flexible without them, then they won't adopt those and they won't trust that robots allow them to fight better. So the converse of all of that is what we're going for. What we're going for is a software interface, a warrior machine interface that's intuitive, that allows soldiers to employ the robots in a way that doesn't add a cognitive burden. That gives them trust that they can fight better with the robots than without. We want them to have capabilities that the robots provide that they don't have without the robots, but they need to be reliable so they can count on them. So if the tethered UAS is the thing that provides them their eye in the sky, if you will, then that tethered UAS needs to be rugged, it needs to be able to bounce across terrain in a cradle, and it needs to be able to launch and be recovered all the time. Otherwise, soldiers won't trust that they can rely on that in a time of need. And similarly, soldiers have a very high bar when it comes to trusting systems that employ lethal force. So if we have an autonomy solution for a lethal capability, the bar is extremely high, as it should be, as moral and legally bound warriors. But if there is a tether, if it's a remote control lethality solution that's not autonomous, the soldiers' demands for low latency and instantaneous feedback is very high, because U.S. soldiers, rightly so, don't want to have any doubt in their mind that when they identify a target, what they see in their sight from a control vehicle is the same thing that the robot is seeing several terrain features away. And that when they pull the trigger or they give the command to fire, that it's going to hit the thing that they had identified as an enemy target and not something else. So building that trust requires rugged, reliable systems that can perform in the most austere environments.
And to get after really going through that, it's in my mind, it's increasing the speed and scale of our experimentation, getting this equipment into soldiers' hands. We see a lot of different activities ongoing. We mentioned we just wrapped up an activity at NTC that was really in support of PEO ground combat systems. We also have General Rash and the RICTO activity, where Army senior leaders are asking them to look at being able to get and equip more kits and get it into our soldiers' hands to increase the speed and scale by which we're getting that feedback to inform the organization from an HMI formation perspective in lights and heavies. It's also, as we start getting these reps, when we talk about trust, in addition to getting, before we get it to the soldiers, it's how do we get it through our test community and some of our other processes. I see friends here from the Army Test and Evaluation Center and Army Evaluation Center. What are the processes by which we test very efficiently these systems, ensure that we know that they have reliability, that the safety mechanisms are in there, and still get these out in a timely fashion to learn and employ them?
The trust questions are great, and as a logistician, I see it as twofold. So first, the soldier has to trust it, but quite frankly, the supported formation has to trust that that commodity or that capability is going to get it to their location. And we talk precision. I think these machines have to be able to operate in what we call a degraded or a DDIL environment, where you have JPS potentially is denied. It's that contested environment logic and vernacular that we are accustomed to using. But those have to gain confidence there at the user level, who's employing that robot, but also to the formation it's resupplying. Because if they're not trusting those rugged systems that can get there, you're going to lose the trust that that capability needs to be the backfill of an autonomous or even a tethered or joined platform where you have a human-machine integrated formation or convoy, for example. But I think we've got to, from the logistics side, and especially in a contested environment, look at that.
Super, thanks. At this time, I'd like to open it up for questions. If you could please just raise your hand, say your name, your affiliation, and then if you are directing the question to someone, if you could say that. So any questions, and we do have a microphone.
Hi, Sidney Friedberg from Breaking Defense. Excuse me for not getting up, but I think I probably will never get up again.
You're good.
A question. A lot of focus here on software, on interfaces, not on platforms. So I want to ask, how do we get to the software? How do we get to, there's ideas, for example, of, modular software, of decomposing software so that there are, you can use the same navigation module on different things. You can use the same payloads on different things. How do you get to the flexibility and the commonality of software, especially since the U.S. Army is not the world's leading software development organization?
Sydney, great question, and I'll take the first crack at that and then pass it to Mr. Kadju, who's been working this space rigorously for a number of years. So I'll talk about the program of record. The Robotic Combat Vehicle Light is actually two programs. It's actually a platform program to develop the robotic vehicle itself, and as you've seen from recent announcements that we've down selected to 4 vendors to provide that platform to move forward into competition. They'll each produce 2 prototype vehicles within a year, delivered by next August. But to your point, there is a accompanying software acquisition pathway that underpins the Robotic Combat Vehicle Light effort that is going to be based fundamentally on a modular open system architecture, and it will allow for the government to rapidly iterate and bring in best-of-breed capabilities into this open architecture so we can have the best software solvers developing solutions to our problems. This is something that the Ground Vehicle Systems Center has been working diligently for a number of years, and so I'll pass it to Mr. Kadju to outline everything they've done.
Perfect, thank you. And really what I see is a convergence on this platform space. It's very similar to the other combat system modernization activities underway that's really underpinned by the Ground Combat System Infrastructure Architecture, which is an amazing acronym, GCIA. But the intent there is to have an open system where we are able to partner, to your point, with industry, best of breed athletes, if you will, that understand and are bringing very unique and capable software modules into the platform. One of our focus areas is making sure that we are sharing those emerging standards. What does that next iteration of that architecture look like with industry, using a variety of our forums and getting feedback. So we can get feedback to say, where do we think we got it right? Where do we need to modify those standards to ensure that we can pull in capabilities? Ultimately, what I also see as a critical piece is what is the pipeline by which we have continuous integration and continuous deployment. And how do we ensure that from a cyber perspective, we have the right tooling to go through the vetting process? I'll bring up the test community again. So it's really then us defining what that continuous integration, continuous deployment pipeline looks like. And that's something that we absolutely are investing in and working through as a broad community across the Army.
Okay. Sir, please.
Thank you, John Harper with Defense Scoop. In terms of having a, is this on? Okay, sorry. In terms of having a common controller for the RCVs, are you envisioning, some sort of tablet or a laptop or just, a computer in a vehicle or, a PlayStation-like controller? How do you see that playing out?
I mean, I guess in general, I don't know that I have a particular design that one, we want something that soldiers naturally are able to use easily and can migrate to. Ideally, it's a controller they're already carrying. I mean, we've talked about some of the end user devices they might have on them. But what we don't want to do is, again, as I mentioned before, is burden. We've got 5 different things we need to employ, and we got to carry 5 different controllers with 5 different batteries that require 5 different types of training. And so the simpler, the better, just from the perspective of the maneuver center. And I know we've experimented with a couple. We'll be using a couple here in the next week or two, and then during our experiment, the Advanced Expeditionary Warfighting experiment that occurs in February, we'll be looking at a couple different versions also. But it's just a simple, rugged capability. And I don't know, Jeff.
Yeah, and so with the robotic combat vehicle experiments, we've tried a number of different controllers and got really great feedback. Mr. Cadge, you highlighted some of the feedback that was a little surprising as it related to having really elegant Formula One style controllers that were actually less popular than just a simple laptop, keyboard, mouse setup that the gamers might be more familiar with. So we're gaining insights on those controller demands, but the key thing is that regardless of what the physical construct is, that the software that's running behind them is common, and that the interface allows the soldier to go from one platform to the other to another without having to learn a new software system. There's an interface that's common across them.
Sir, please.
Yeah, if I could just add too, because again, you want to be able to pass off some of these capabilities. One may be a sensor capability, one may be a loitering munition. You want to be able to seamlessly control and hand off targets and capabilities across the formation.
Hi, Stu Magnuson, National Defense Magazine. Do you have an end date for when you would, any kind of years you're shooting for? I'm kind of hearkening back to leader-follower technology, which was in development for years and years and years, and then just, I don't know, went away. Is this for the Army of 2030, for the Army of 2040? Just trying to get it narrow in on when you think this is going to actually be fielded in the hands of soldiers, as General McConville said a couple years ago.
Well, I mean, General Rainey from Army Futures Command's pushing us hard as rapidly as we can. We're going to have some prototypes this year of what a platoon type formation might look like to augment a company team on both the light and the armor side. I mean, I think as we look towards 2030, some of it's integrating current capabilities in a human machine interface, type formation. I think as you look beyond 2030 to 2040, I mean, there's probably some other things we could be asking, robots to do, or this type of interface to offer us. But I'll defer to these guys too.
Yeah, it's a great question. So speaking to specific programs, I see Stu Hatfield in the audience there. He's been a force of nature to get the Squad Multipurpose Equipment Transporter fielded to FORSCOM units. That work is underway now. So we have robots fielded to FORSCOM units now in light divisions. But to your point, as it relates to robotic combat vehicles, right now there is a program of record, the RCV Light program, middle tier acquisition for rapid prototyping. It goes to an outcome determination in a couple years, but the intent is for that to move into a major capability acquisition, if that's the direction the AAE chooses to go, or it could follow a different pathway. But to have first units equipped by fiscal year 28. So first units equipped in fiscal year 28 with RCV Light, and that's the robots, the control vehicles, the associated network, and of course the software that underpins that. So that's the timeline we're looking at for robotic combat vehicles.
And just one final comment on there. And we really talked about specific systems, and you alluded to specific systems, where Army senior leadership, especially General Rainey and team, are challenging us here on the panel is, as these systems come online and as we see technology available today, how are we thinking about organizing differently? How do these capabilities integrate into a tank company of the future? What is the training, organization, and doctrine around there? That's why the linkage to General Buzzard and his folks are so critical as these program of record activities are moving out.
And I'd like to add, even though being a facilitator, is that one of the things that General Norman talked about is not letting the aspirational get in the way of the feasible. and why there's so many things that we can do today. But the reason why I'm on this panel is because we've been focused on the 2030 to 2040 concept, and human-machine integration is that important to us. So what is exciting and in the field that we're testing today is what these gentlemen are talking about, but the Army, this is where General Rainey, in support of the Chief and the Secretary, are going. So absolutely. I think we've got time for one last question, sir.
Question for Colonel Upton. You spoke about distributed logistics. Oh, sorry, by the way, Diego Lage with Signal Magazine here. You spoke about distributed logistics, Indo-PACOM. Could you please expand on the type of capabilities you'd need for the distances, how they would look, what kind of integration you're looking forward to, so on? Thank you.
It's a great question. So one of the key portfolio projects we're going to start, and it ties into human-machine integration, are smaller, as that theme, autonomous vessels. I talked about multi-capable distribution at air, land, and sea. A smaller littoral type vessel that could not have to dock in a contested environment, not have to go ashore, but could do ship-to-shore logistics with a UAS or robotic where you've got human control. So back to the controller piece of that, a human's controlling that formation, but it almost becomes, in that type of scenario, a drone swarm on the sea. So they're unpredictable routes. You program them multiple, and you look at that distribution capability as a tiered approach. So we have to back up to the strategic support area, and you've got to get it into the AOR. Then you'll have a smaller vessel that would take maybe ship to ship or out of a large port that's not, say, in a contested environment, unload that cargo, then take it to these smaller HMI type, smaller autonomous vessels. That's just one thing to kind of answer your question, if that helps. That's what we're working on.
Thanks so much, Shane. We have 2 minutes left, so what I'd like is just to give the gentleman last thoughts, 30 seconds to wrap up the panel.
Well, again, thanks for an opportunity to be here. This is an incredibly important topic and capabilities that we're talking about fielding. I know as I reflect or look forward in my next year at the Maneuver Center, I know I'm going to be spending a lot of time focusing on this. We have a really exciting kind of experiment exercise coming up in the next couple weeks. We're going to look at this again very hard as part of our AWE, our Army Expeditionary Warfighting Experiment in February. We owe the force capability in this realm. There's things out there now that we could incorporate and build into it, and then again looking towards the future, because we know our adversaries are doing the same thing. And again, this is just there's important opportunities here to be better as an Army.
And I'd like to thank everybody for being part of the audience today, and for those who asked questions, thanks for your questions and insights. This is an exciting time for all of those of us that are working in the transformation space. As General Buzzard mentioned, this is about transforming our formations, not just fielding a particular equipment item. So look forward to working with many of you in the audience as we develop these formations moving forward, and look forward to making progress together.
In a similar vein, a lot of the discussion was on feedback, soldier experiments and receiving that feedback. From a technology perspective and a requirements perspective, receiving feedback from industry is critically important as well. And so what I would just ask you to do as you're engaging with our teams is providing feedback, looking at the documents, the artifacts, the requirements. From your perspective, what do we have right and where do we need to shift based on your experiences? And I just ask you to continuously provide that, and we will guarantee that we will look at it, we will vet it, and we will make changes as we receive that information.
Now, I know we're running out of time. One, thank you, but just two things to close with. Viable capability is extremely important. When we bring things like this and sustain these formations, that's the here and now. But I'd ask you to have a good dialogue as partners with us on what you see 2040, what capability, where are those technologies headed, and where we can see that common picture. But no, thank you.
Thank you all so much. AUSA, thanks for hosting this. We'll be around for a while. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Army Futures Command with Warriors Corner. Our next presentation will be at 1:40 p.m. by U.S. Army Pacific.